She said she noticed every time I lingered, and suddenly, I couldn't stop. The first time I really noticed her, I wasn't even sure I was supposed to. My landlady, 40 years old, with a quiet grace that seemed effortless, had always been there. A presence in the background of my small apartment building. She moved through the hallways with an ease I envied, each step measured, deliberate, like she belonged not just in the building but in the air itself. That evening, I lingered a little longer than usual by my door, fumbling with my keys, trying not to look obvious. But then she appeared, rounding the corner with her set of keys in one hand and a folded laundry basket in the other. Her eyes met mine, and it felt like she had been expecting me to linger. She didn't scold or comment immediately, just a subtle tilt of her head, a soft smile that seemed to say she knew exactly what I was doing. I caught the way the hallway light glinted off her hair, chestnut with a hint of gold in the dim glow, the faint scent of her perfume. A mix of something floral, something warm, drifted toward me, and my pulse betrayed my calm exterior. "Evening," she said casually, her voice smooth, calm, but carrying that unspoken weight, the kind that makes you acutely aware of your every movement. I nodded, barely able to form words. My hands shook slightly as I finally managed to get my keys in the lock. She stepped closer to pass, the brush of her sleeve against mine a tiny shock to my senses. There was no urgency in her movement, no rush to leave. It was as if she was savoring the small space between us, letting the hallway become a stage for a quiet observation neither of us had fully acknowledged yet. I noticed the little details, the ones you usually don't. The way her cardigan fell softly over her shoulders, the subtle rhythm of her breathing as she adjusted the basket, the delicate curve of her smile as if she had caught some private joke in her head. I lingered against every instinct to move, to pretend I wasn't noticing, because there was something magnetic about the way she existed in that small hallway. She had an awareness of people, of space, of the tiny currents between strangers, that made me suddenly self-conscious and thrilled at the same time. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, the hallway narrowing in the quiet between us. Then, with that effortless grace, she moved past, leaving the faintest warmth lingering in the air. My heart raced, and I realized, in that tiny exchange, that something had shifted. I was aware of her in a way that went beyond mere landlord and tenant, beyond casual greetings and polite distance. She had noticed me noticing her, and in that subtle acknowledgement, a seed of something unspoken, something quietly urgent, had been planted. I stepped inside my apartment, leaning against the door, trying to calm the strange fluttering in my chest. She had passed, and yet, the space between us still hummed with a quiet tension, a promise of something neither of us had dared to name. And I knew, somehow, that this was only the beginning. By the following morning, the building felt different. The ordinary hum of the hallway, the faint squeak of the mailboxes, even the soft thud of my own footsteps on the carpeted stairs. All of it seemed sharper, more alive. She was there again, of course, moving with her usual quiet confidence. This time, I paid attention not just to her presence, but to her habits, the little rituals that made her feel human, approachable, yet impossibly graceful. She was arranging potted plants in the lobby, crouched down to adjust the soil in a pot with the meticulous care of someone who found joy in small, private tasks. Her cardigan fell open slightly as she leaned forward, revealing a soft blouse beneath. She hummed under her breath, a tune I didn't recognize, but one that lingered in the air, warm and comforting. I lingered near the doorway, pretending to sort mail, but I couldn't help watching. Every small movement of hers was a lesson in ease, in quiet confidence, in owning space without needing to announce it. "Morning," she said without looking up, her voice casual, yet carrying that subtle note that suggested she had already noticed me lingering. The words weren't a question, but they weren't dismissive either. They were exactly the kind of neutral intimacy that made my heart skip. I mumbled a response, my voice betraying a slight awkwardness I couldn't hide. She glanced at me briefly, a hint of amusement in her eyes, then returned to her plants, adjusting a leaf just so. The sunlight filtered in through the lobby windows, striking her hair and illuminating the faint golden highlights I hadn't noticed before. I caught the scent of coffee from the mug she had set on the bench nearby, a warm, inviting aroma that somehow made the space feel more private, more ours, even though we were strangers in the same building. Our eyes met again when she reached for a fallen leaf, and for a moment, the room shrank to just the two of us. She noticed how I lingered, and the small smile she gave me was enough to unbalance me completely. There was a teasing weight behind her gaze, a soft acknowledgement that she saw more than I intended to reveal. And yet, she didn't press, didn't comment further, just let the moment stretch, letting me feel the thrill of her quiet observation. When she handed me a note she had found tucked under the mailbox flap, our fingers brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, and electric. I hesitated, caught between instinct and restraint, acutely aware of the warmth of her hand and the slight softness of her touch. She didn't pull away. Her eyes held mine just long enough to make me conscious of every subtle gesture, every tilt of her head, every movement of her shoulders. I realized then that attraction wasn't just in grand gestures. It was in these small, intimate observations, in the way she noticed me noticing her, in the way her presence made the ordinary hallways of my apartment feel like a world vibrating with possibility. By the time I turned toward my apartment, I wasn't just thinking about the hallway, or the plants, or the sunlight. I was thinking about her. And for the first time, I caught myself hoping she'd notice me again tomorrow. Over the next few days, the hallway was no longer the only place our interactions lingered. I started noticing her in the shared spaces, the laundry room, the mailbox area, even the small rooftop garden we both sometimes used. Each encounter was brief, almost incidental, but charged with a subtle electricity that neither of us addressed directly. One late afternoon, I found her in the laundry room, crouched beside a humming washing machine, her sleeves rolled up slightly to reveal delicate forearms. The warm glow from the window behind her caught the edges of her hair, highlighting faint golden streaks against the deep chestnut. She hummed again, a different tune, this time soft, almost like a lullaby, but the effect was the same. It filled the small room with a sense of warmth and quiet intimacy. I lingered in the doorway, pretending to check the settings on my own washer, acutely aware of the small space between us. She glanced up, and her eyes held mine for a fraction longer than politeness required. There was that same teasing awareness I had noticed in the hallway, but now it was richer, layered with curiosity and unspoken connection. She raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk tugging at her lips, as if silently asking, "Are you going to linger again?" As I moved closer to swap my laundry, our hands brushed while reaching for the same bottle of detergent. It was an almost trivial gesture, but the warmth of her skin against mine sent a shock of awareness down my spine. I hesitated, letting my hand hover near hers for just a heartbeat too long. She didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, eyes glinting with amusement, and continued folding her laundry with the same casual elegance. The moment stretched, silent yet intensely communicative. The scent of detergent mixed with her perfume, soft, floral, comforting, creating an atmosphere that felt intimate despite the mundane setting. I noticed the way she occasionally ran a hand through her hair, the small shifts of her shoulders as she moved through the space, the way she seemed to exist fully in her own rhythm yet made space for me to be part of it. Every small motion was magnetic, pulling me in, making ordinary errands feel charged with potential. We fell into a rhythm, unspoken yet shared. I would linger just enough for her to notice, and she would respond in kind, soft smiles, fleeting eye contact, subtle body language that said she was paying attention. It was exhilarating and frightening all at once, this dance of small gestures and silent acknowledgments. Each encounter left me acutely aware of her presence, and of the way my own heart and mind were drawn to her without reason or permission. When I finally left the laundry room, I realized the simple act of crossing paths had become an event in itself. She had this effortless ability to make the mundane feel significant, to make me notice her in ways I couldn't articulate. And though nothing had been spoken beyond casual greetings, I felt a quiet certainty that the world between us was beginning to shift. Slowly, deliberately, with a tension that neither of us seemed ready to release. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew one thing. I would seek out these shared spaces again tomorrow, not out of necessity, but out of desire, to be near her, to linger, and to see if she noticed once more. It was a late evening when I saw her again, leaning against the stairwell railing on the third floor. The building was quiet, the faint hum of distant traffic drifting up from the street below. The fluorescent light above flickered softly, casting gentle shadows along the walls. I had been coming home from a long day, mind wrapped in the usual anxieties. And there she was, her posture slightly slouched, a quiet weight in her shoulders I hadn't seen before. "Long day?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes entirely. "You could say that," she admitted, her voice carrying a hint of exhaustion. There was a pause, just long enough to make the air feel electric. Then she added, "Sometimes, it's harder than it looks, managing all of this." Her gesture encompassed the building, the lobby, the small apartment units, but also something deeper, a life lived carefully, responsibly, and sometimes alone. I stepped closer, unsure why proximity felt necessary, but somehow inevitable. The stairwell was narrow, and the faint scent of her perfume mingled with the cool night air. I wanted to say something comforting, but words felt inadequate. So I simply nodded, letting her voice fill the space, attentive to every inflection. She leaned slightly toward me as she spoke, as if seeking an anchor, and I realized that I was holding my breath. Her vulnerability was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it resonated deeply. For a moment, the age difference, the hesitation, the social boundaries, all of it fell away. I was simply present with her, feeling the quiet gravity of her existence. Without thinking, I reached out and lightly touched her forearm, a gesture meant to reassure, to let her know she wasn't alone. Her skin was warm beneath my fingers, softer than I expected. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her arm rest against mine briefly, the faintest shiver betraying the impact of such a simple connection. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability behind her confidence, the delicate strength that carried her through long days and quiet nights. We stood there in silence, the hum of the building and the distant city forming a soft backdrop. My heart raced in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with awareness. Awareness of her, of the moment, of the delicate intimacy between two people who barely knew each other but were starting to feel the contours of connection. When she finally straightened, a faint smile returning to her lips, she said, almost as if testing me, "Thanks for just being here." It was a simple statement, yet it carried the weight of unspoken acknowledgement. I wanted to say more, to capture the strange, tender mix of admiration and longing swelling inside me. But I didn't. I let her retreat down the stairs first, feeling a strange pull, a quiet ache as I watched her move with that same effortless grace that had drawn me in from the beginning. That night, as I lay in my apartment, I replayed the stairwell moment over and over. The warmth of her skin, the softness of her voice, the way vulnerability could be both intimidating and inviting. I realized then that something had shifted. We were no longer just landlady and tenant, no longer casual acquaintances in the same building. Something unspoken had begun, delicate and fragile, and I found myself wanting to nurture it carefully, to linger in this quiet closeness before the world had a chance to intrude. It started with something almost insignificant, a small disagreement over building rules. I had left a stray box in the lobby, and she caught sight of it as she walked past. "You know, these hallways aren't for storage," she said, her voice calm but carrying that unmistakable tone of playful admonishment. 40 years old, confident, graceful, yet somehow entirely human in that moment. She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, and I could tell she was amused, not angry. "I thought it looked fine here," I muttered, feigning nonchalance, though I felt my heart race. Her eyes glinted with mischief, and she took a slow step closer, narrowing the distance between us just enough to make me notice the faint warmth radiating from her. "Fine?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Are you always this deliberate about breaking rules?" Her teasing tone did something to me, something electric. I caught myself smiling despite my attempt at casual defiance, and I realized I had been anticipating this small exchange more than I wanted to admit. There was something intoxicating in the way she spoke, the way her voice dipped just enough to make ordinary words feel intimate. We moved to the small rooftop garden to settle the dispute, ostensibly to rearrange the box and keep things tidy. The evening sky painted the city in warm amber, string lights overhead casting soft halos around the potted flowers. She worked with effortless grace, bending to move a chair or adjusting a planter, and I found myself watching every motion. The way her hair fell across her shoulder, the gentle curve of her back as she leaned down, the quiet authority in her movements. At one point, our hands brushed while lifting a lightweight chair together. The contact was fleeting, accidental, or so I tried to tell myself, but it sent a jolt through me. Her fingers lingered just a fraction longer than necessary, and I noticed the faintest smile tug at her lips, one that felt both teasing and sincere. We laughed lightly at our coordination, and for a moment, I felt a bubble of warmth and ease that made the city below fade to nothing. There was something about the balance between her confidence and subtle vulnerability that drew me in. She teased, yes, but never cruelly. She challenged, yes, but never aggressively. Her presence demanded attention without asking for it, and I realized I had been holding my breath, unconsciously leaning closer, savoring the energy between us. When the box was finally moved and the chairs replaced, she stepped back, brushing her hands together as if to shake off the moment. But her eyes lingered on mine, and that quiet acknowledgement was enough to make my chest tighten. We didn't speak of it further, yet the rooftop held a charged, delicate tension, one that promised something deeper if we dared to notice it. As I walked back to my apartment, I found myself replaying the touches, the glances, the gentle teasing over the box. It was playful, yes, but beneath it ran something more profound. An awareness of each other, a recognition that the ordinary could feel extraordinary simply because we were both present, noticing. And somewhere, buried beneath the teasing, was the quiet hope that these small encounters were only the beginning. The sunset that evening made the lobby feel almost magical, the warm amber light spilling through the frosted glass windows, casting long, soft shadows across the floor. I had come home, exhausted from a day of work, but the moment I stepped in, I sensed that the building itself felt different. She was there naturally, leaning against the reception desk, a small stack of papers in her hands. Even in this casual posture, she radiated that quiet authority and effortless grace that had drawn me in from the very beginning. Our eyes met the instant I entered, and a small, knowing smile curved her lips. She had that look, the one that suggested she knew exactly what I was thinking, perhaps even before I did. I felt a tug in my chest, a mixture of anticipation and hesitation. For days, I had been careful, lingering just enough to be noticed, always aware of the subtle signals she gave me. But now, standing here in the fading light, it felt as if the balance had shifted. "I notice every time you linger," she said, her voice calm but teasing, like a secret shared just between the two of us. She placed the papers down on the desk and leaned slightly forward, her eyes locking onto mine in a way that left no room for pretense. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink to just the two of us. I opened my mouth to reply, but no words came. Instead, I just stood there, acutely aware of her presence, the warmth radiating from her as she shifted slightly closer. The faint scent of her perfume, soft and floral, enveloped me, and I realized I could feel the gentle brush of her hair as she tucked a loose strand behind her ear. The ordinary lobby, the hum of the building, even the dull thrum of traffic outside, all of it faded into a quiet background, leaving only her. She tilted her head slightly, a playful glint in her eyes, letting the silence stretch in a way that was almost unbearable, but in the best possible way. I wanted to step closer, to reach out, but I restrained myself, savoring the tension, the charged intimacy that existed in this suspended moment. Every subtle gesture, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk, the shift of her weight, the soft curve of her smile, spoke louder than words ever could. Finally, I managed a smile, my own nervous, tentative acknowledgement of what she had just admitted. The air between us was electric yet tender, as if we had both crossed an invisible threshold without fully realizing it. Her awareness of me, and mine of her, had transformed the mundane into something intimate, something shared and unspoken. When she stepped back slightly, giving me just enough space to breathe, the moment didn't feel broken. Instead, it lingered, suspended in time, a quiet acknowledgement of mutual recognition. I left the lobby slowly, every step heavy with awareness, replaying her words in my mind. She notices me. That simple phrase, spoken so casually, carried with it a depth of intimacy and possibility I hadn't dared imagine. For the first time, the tension didn't feel uncertain or frustrating. It felt like a promise, a fragile, delicate promise that the next time we met, we could explore the space between us with awareness, with curiosity, and with a quiet acknowledgement that something was beginning. That night, the rooftop felt like a different world. The city lights stretched endlessly below, twinkling like a scattered constellation, and the cool night air carried the faint scent of jasmine from the potted plants lining the railing. I climbed the stairs slowly, half expecting her not to be there, half hoping she would be. And there she was, leaning casually against the railing, arms crossed, yet somehow relaxed, illuminated by the warm glow of a single string light above us. 40 years old, confident and graceful, yet vulnerable in a way that made her profoundly human. She turned as I approached, and her smile hit me like sunlight, warm and effortless. "You came," she said, a soft teasing in her tone that matched the glint in her eyes. I nodded, words failing me in the presence of this quiet, potent intimacy. The city hummed below, but up here the world had narrowed to just the two of us. We fell into an easy rhythm, talking about everything and nothing. I listened, more attentive than I ever had, noticing the slight curve of her lips when she laughed, the way her shoulders relaxed when she leaned slightly closer to me. I found myself mirroring her movements unconsciously, stepping closer when she stepped closer, holding my hands just a little longer in hers when she brushed them lightly against mine. At one point, she reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from my forehead, her fingers lingering against my skin just enough to make my pulse jump. I felt the warmth of her touch settle over me, a subtle, electric intimacy that didn't demand anything more than our shared awareness. She didn't move away, didn't retreat, and I realized in that instant how rare and how exhilarating it was to be seen this way, fully and quietly. The conversation softened, drifting to the small, personal confessions we'd shared over the past weeks. She spoke about her long days, her moments of solitude, and the little joys that made her life feel full despite its challenges. I shared my own experiences, hesitations, and the way her presence had become something I anticipated in every ordinary moment. Each word, each pause, each glance carried an intimacy that neither of us had forced, but that had grown naturally, delicately, like vines intertwining over time. Eventually, we fell silent, standing close enough that our shoulders brushed, our fingers occasionally touching in fleeting contact. The night felt heavy with possibility and yet gentle in its restraint. No grand declarations were necessary. The quiet acknowledgement of our mutual attention, the unspoken recognition of the attraction that had been building since that first hallway glance, was enough. Finally, she tilted her head slightly, her eyes soft and knowing, and whispered, almost to herself, "I'm glad you lingered." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the summer night and everything to do with her. "Me too," I admitted quietly. We stood there a moment longer, letting the city lights wash over us, a gentle promise hanging in the air. No rush, no pressure, just presence. Just acknowledgement. Just the beginning of something tender, unspoken, and real. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely at ease in her company, and I knew that whatever came next, we had built a foundation of trust, attention, and subtle intimacy strong enough to hold whatever might follow. And as I finally turned to head back to my apartment, I carried the quiet warmth of that rooftop moment with me, knowing that sometimes the most profound connections are built not on dramatic gestures, but on noticing, lingering, and being present with someone who sees you. If you've ever felt the quiet thrill of noticing someone, or the tension of lingering glances that say more than words ever could, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of slow burn romance. And don't forget to share your favorite moment from the story in the comments. I'd love to hear which small gestures made your heart skip a beat.